A lot of enablement work starts with a request. Someone says, we need discovery training, or manager need to coach more, or can we create better proposal templates, or can you help us improve forecast accuracy? Those requests may all be very valid, but they are not yet program. And this is where many enablement teams get pulled into the wrong work too quickly. They move straight from a request to solution, like a workshop, a playbook, a training session, a certification, a new template. But if the problem is systemic, one intervention will not be enough. And if the problem is tactical, a full program may be too much. So the practical question is not how do we build more enablement activity, it's how do we know when a problem deserves a full sales enablement program, and how do we design that program so it actually changes execution in the field and as a result impact business outcomes. That's the focus of this walkthrough. So I put together a full guide and a one-pager on how to build world-class sales enablement programs, and they are linked both in the description below. They go much deeper into the full framework, including the 4 phases of a sales enablement program, the program charter, the planning steps, the performance gap diagnostic, the enablement lever matrix, and the 5 stages of sales mastery. And finally, the value demonstration model with which you can actually close your program and demonstrate the value of what you produce. For this video, though, I want to focus on practical implementation because we can't go through everything. That would take too long. So what I say, like practical implementation, I say, how do you use the framework inside a real organization where time is limited, data is imperfect, managers are busy, and stakeholders often ask for solution before the problem has been properly diagnosed. So the core idea behind the framework that I propose in the actual guide is pretty simple. A sales enablement program is not, first and foremost, a training plan. It is a structured multi-component initiative designed to improve specific sales outputs and behavior using the right mix of enablement levers, which are training, coaching, content, tools, process, and reinforcement mechanism. Training is one lever, a program orchestrates multiple levers instead. That's the difference when you think about a training plan versus a broader enablement program. And it also means that the work, when it comes to programs, needs to start a lot earlier than most people think. It doesn't start with producing the content, the workshop, the rollout plan. It starts with asking the question of, does this problem actually deserve a program in the first place? Now, this means that there is some steps essentially that we need to take before planning. When a request comes in, the instinct is usually to start designing immediately and producing. What should the session look like? What assets do we need? Who needs to attend? How long should the program run for? But those are not the first right question to ask. The first question, is this a systemic performance problem or is it a more specific tactical issue? That's the entry point I would take from phase 0 of the framework that I propose. Strategic alignment and validation, I call it. So before you build anything, you need to validate whether the issue is large enough, important enough, and complex enough to deserve a full program. A full program is usually justified when the issue affects many reps, teams, region, or deal types. It should influence a meaningful business metric such as win rate, ACV, sales cycle length, pipeline quality, forecast accuracy, or retention. It should require more than one lever to fix, and it should need reinforcement from managers, leaders, other departments like RevOps or marketing, for example. So if those conditions are not present, you may not need a program. You may need just a job aid, an isolated intervention, a process clarification, a short workshop, even a quick manager conversation or meeting. So, for example, if one team is confused about how to complete a section of an account plan template, that is probably not a full program, right? But if our account plans are inconsistent across enterprise opportunities, managers are not expecting them, and poor account planning is affecting deal strategy, and as a result, obviously, like win rates and ACV, for example, that starts to look different. That may actually require clear standards, manager inspections, process changes, examples of good account plans, coaching, and measurement. So now we are probably talking about a program. So the first practical step is to create a simple, I would say, like triage filter. You should ask, does this affect multiple people or deals? Does it connect to a business metric? Does it require more than one intervention? Does it need manager or other function to reinforce the change? So if the answer to those questions is mostly yes, it may justify a program. If the answer is mostly no, you want to keep it lighter, essentially. So this one decision, I would say, prevents a lot of waste that happens in organization, and it stops enablement from overbuilding around small issues. But it also stops the opposite problem, which is treating deep performance gaps as if they can be solved in one session or one just simple intervention, which I've seen many times happen in organization where at the same time, oversimplification can actually lead still to very poor outcomes. Once the problem passes that test, the next move is to create a draft program charter where you can start collaborating with the most important stakeholder. You don't need anything perfect initially. You just want to create enough clarity to move into proper planning. So you define the performance problem, you define the audience, you define one or two high-level outcomes, you clarify the rough scope of the initiative, you name the key stakeholders, and include an early hypothesis about what may need to change in actual execution. For example, in short, I'll simplify a little bit. Discovery quality is inconsistent across mid-market opportunities, and this appears to be contributing to weak discovery to proposal conversion. This program will focus on mid-market AEs and managers. The early hypothesis that the gap is not only skill-based, but also linked to unclear discovery output standards and inconsistent manager inspection. That's a good starting point because it gives you a clear problem, a business connection, a target audience, and an initial performance hypothesis. And most importantly, stops the work from drifting into let's just run some training. Okay, so now from all of this, I think the smallest useful output that I recommend is a one-page program decision brief. I'm not talking about like 20 slides, a complete measurement model, nothing like that. Just a short working document that helps you decide whether an enablement request deserves a program and what the program may need to focus on. Coming back to reinforce the point from before, the brief should answer 7 things. First, what is the problem? Not just what the stakeholder has requested, the actual operating issue. So you need to go a little deeper. For example, not we need discovery training, but discovery quality is inconsistent across mid-market AEs, especially around problem framing and qualification evidence. As you can see, this should be something that is actually observable in many ways. Maybe you have elicited that from multiple codes that have been analyzed. Second, who is the audience? Be clear about who is expected to change behavior and who needs to reinforce that change that's connected to them. In this case, for example, mid-market AEs and their frontline managers. Third, what business metric does it connect to? And this is very important because programs should not exist only to deliver activity. They should support a meaningful business results. If that business result is not meaningful and it's not connected to priority in the business, well, there is no point in pursuing that. So for example, discovery to proposal conversion, in this case, might be the most specific metric. And then, of course, that connects to the broader win rate. And it could be in a specific segment, right, that is critical for the business. Fourth, what the evidence suggests that the issue is real. Again, you don't need perfect data, but you need some signal to demonstrate like that, okay, this is underpinned by some things that we can observe in the data, whether it's qualitative or quantitative. Maybe conversion has dropped, maybe managers see the same issue in deal reviews, maybe core reviews show recurring gaps, and maybe RevOps data show stage progression is poor, okay? So fifth, is the problem systemic or tactical? If it is isolated, as we said before, you keep it light. If it is repeated, metric linked, and something requiring multiple enablement lever, in that case, it will require a program. Sixth, what critical outputs or output need to improve? This is one of the most important ideas in the whole framework that I propose. A program should not focus on the question like what do reps need to learn or how they should behave or all this kind of stuff. Like what really connects to business outcome is more about what they produce. So the question is that what must reps produce differently in real work, and defining as well the standard at which they have to produce that. For example, there could be better discovery notes, stronger qualification summaries, higher quality proposal, better business cases, clearer mutual action plan that are built with the buyers, more reliable forecast submission, or stronger account plans, like something very tangible that they're producing off the back of their behavior. The outputs matter because they are observable, once again. Because they are observable, you can expect them, you can coach around them, and you can compare them to a standard. So you can compare them to what good looks like so that people know whether they're doing a good job or whether they need to improve. Seventh, who needs to be involved? So enablement may own the design, but it rarely owns the full change. That's for sure, right? Manager may need to inspect and coach. RevOps may need to support with the data, the workflow, and some of the maybe tech stack aspect. Sales leaders may need to sponsor and protect the focus. So for a discovery improvement example, the brief of role might look something like this. The problem, discovery quality is inconsistent across mid-market opportunity, especially in first call qualification and problem framing. The audience, mid-market AEs and frontline managers. The business metric, discovery to proposal conversion, which is tied to overall win rate. The critical output is a structured discovery package that combines different, I would say, sub-items within it after the first call, including discovery notes, qualification summary, and buyer recap email that gets sent out. The likely gap is that reps lack a shared quality standard, managers inspect discovery inconsistently, and CRM workflows do not reinforce structured discovery. And perhaps it might be even a need of more of a tool in the flow of work, like an AI copilot or a conversational assistant. So the next step is to run a working session with managers to validate the discovery output standard and draft the program chart together. That's how you start. That's a small artifact that does a lot of the job to create clarity and allow you to engage in conversation with the other stakeholders. So you want to slow down earlier to get faster later, and creating this sort of shared frame. Now, it's also important to think about what often tend to get in the way so that we can avoid some of the most typical mistakes that I've heard many times from numerous leaders I've spoken to. So there are different places where implementation tends to get affected in a negative way. The first is when stakeholders ask for a solution before the problem has been diagnosed. And this happens all the time, and we already highlighted it. A leader is convinced that what's needed is negotiation training, or a manager might say that all we need is better onboarding material. Those may all point to real issue, but they are not diagnoses. That's very important. The practical job of enablement is to pause and ask, what is actually preventing the desired behavior from happening, right? Is it a capability gap? Do people actually lack the skills or knowledge? Or is it resources, tool, or process gaps? Do they know what to do in the first place? And have we told them what are the standards that they need to uphold? And is there an information gap potentially? Or does this anything to do with incentives and consequences? Maybe the system is leading people to do something different from what they expected because they are forced to go in that direction. Maybe the system is rewarding the wrong behavior, essentially. Or is even a capacity gap? Are people overloaded? Are we asking too much of them? These are all like important questions that you have to keep in mind as you go through this diagnostic step and have a conversation with those stakeholders. And this is super critical. I want to stress this, and it's important to understand so that it gives you the confidence to have that conversation with the senior stakeholders. Because if you diagnose wrongly to start with, the rest doesn't even matter, right? If the issue is unclear standard, training will not fix it. If the issue is manager inspection, a new playbook, again, will not fix it. You need to work that playbook together with the managers so they know exactly what are we talking about. If the issue is like tool friction, CRM friction, or whatever, another workshop, will just add more work and more frustration on people. So the second barrier that often comes into play is defaulting to training. Training is familiar, it's visible, it feels like action, but training only solves capability gaps. If reps already understand the concept, but do not have the right tools, examples, the consistent feedback that they're receiving, training may increase activity without changing performance whatsoever. So for example, if managers are not reviewing discovery outputs, running better discovery training may help for a week or two. But if the operating system does not change, and the system with which reps are operating, reps will revert to the old habit. So the third barrier is unclear manager ownership. And we all know that frontline management is a multiplier factor. So most programs will have to always rely on manager to reinforce that change. Manager need to know what to inspect, how often to inspect it, and what to coach when quality is not good enough. And they need to know also how to better coach. That's why sales manager enablement is very important. And if managers see the program as just an enablement thing, you can be sure that there won't be any reinforcement happening. So that's also why my guy spends time on the manager enablement kit. That's how I called it. So at a minimum, manager need three things. What output should I inspect, right? How often should I inspect it? And what behavior should I coach when the output falls short? Because you should coach on the behavior only when the output quality or volume is not coming to the standard that has been defined. Otherwise, there's no point to focus on behavior itself. So without those, manager may support the program in principle, but ultimately fail to reinforce it in practice. The fourth barrier is weak measurement. And I know that different teams have different maturity level, but still many teams focus on like attendance, completion, satisfaction, participation. And those signals have some use, but they do not prove behavioral change in any way. Like they don't look at that middle layer between the activity and the final outcome. So a strong measurement plan looks across the performance chain. Are people ready to perform? Are behaviors changing in live deals? Are outputs that these people are producing through that behavior improving? Are managers reinforcing the standards? Are business outcomes moving in a plausible direction? That's where also the own-shape support model that I've developed and I talk about in the guide is very helpful. Women own some things directly, such as program design, content, some of the tools and the learning assets. Enablement then influences, shapes essentially behaviors and workflows such as discovery, quality, proposal quality, qualification consistency, or the adoption of the tools. And then enablement supports business outcomes, but doesn't control it because it's working together with the other partners in the cross-functional team. And I'm talking about business outcome like win rate, ACV, sales cycle length, or forecast accuracy. That's very important to understand because the boundaries should be clear on what we can control and what we just like influencing or supporting. And we should never claim sole ownership in enablement to revenue outcome. The reality is that those outcomes are contributed together in how the team, the cross-functional team in GTM is working to produce a specific outcome. The fifth barrier is scope creep, and this is a very common one. Program might start with focusing on discovery quality, since we are making example about discovery, but then quickly expand into, methodology adoption, proposals, maybe sales messaging or whatever, right? So because other people are chipping in later down the line in the program. So those connections may be real, but if the scope becomes too broad, then the program is impossible to run and obviously even harder to measure and iterate against. So you need to keep that scope very clear, and that's why the charter that we discussed is so important. The charter gives you a reference point when new requests appear, and you can say, yes, that might be important, but does it belong in the program charter? That one sentence just allows you to protect the work with clear officiality. And I would say the final barrier is readiness. A program can be well designed, but still fail because the organization is not ready to run it. Because a lot of the elements that need to be in place cannot be in place for various reasons. For example, templates are not ready, CRM fields are not updated, managers are not aligned, reports or dashboard are not live, inspection cadences are not scheduled, and stakeholders have not agreed what will be enforced, like there is no shared agreement yet. If those conditions are missing, launch will be inevitably fragile. And that's why the preparation in the initial phase, especially the first one we said, phase 0, and when we go into actual planning, matters so much. Before delivery begins, you need some sort of like go or no go check. So can the system actually support the behavior change you're asking for? If not, pausing for a week or multiple weeks may be better than launching a program that undermines its own credibility. Now that we talk about the barrier to implementation, I think it's also important to talk about how to adapt things to your environment, okay? So the full framework is very rigorous, the one I describe in the actual guide. But you don't need to apply every part to full depth in every organization. It really depends on your situation. The value is in preserving the logic, not turning the model into a burden. So in a low maturity environment, you want to simplify it heavily. You want to start with 3 important steps. Validate whether the issue deserves a program, create a one-page draft charter, and then define one output that must improve, that is clearly connected to business outcome. So for example, if onboarding is inconsistent, do not start by redesigning the entire onboarding journey. Start by asking, what must a new rep be able to produce by week 4? Maybe the answer is a structured discovery plan or a first call prep document or qualification summary. Once you know the output, you can work backwards, okay? What behaviors created, what example do reps need to know what good looks like, what should manager look at, and what support need to exist in the flow of work. Okay, that's basically a very simple starting point, and then you can also replicate across other outputs that need to produce that connect to other business outcomes. So if you're in a small company, again, as well, you want to keep the artifacts quite light. One person may be responsible for strategy, design, delivery, and measurement. So, you don't want to create any heavy governance. Instead, use a short charter, a simple gap diagnosis, and a practical reinforcement checklist, okay? But keep the performance chain intact. The logic should still be the same. Business outcomes, outputs, behaviors, gaps, and the enablement levers that you use to address those gaps. As we said, levers are training, coaching, process. You have also reinforcement mechanism and so forth. That is the spine you need to take into account. Now, in a more mature organization, you can use more of the full model because RevOps can help you with workflow design, dashboard, setting up the CRM fields correctly, reporting, and any other tool that is necessary for whatever you're trying to achieve. Sales leaders can help you prioritize and protect the focus and just provide air cover. And manager can own inspection and coaching end to end. Then enablement can design the program, steward the standards, and interpret the evidence as we go along, especially not just lagging indicator at the end, but especially those leading indicator that connects to behaviors and outputs. In an enterprise environment, the biggest risk then is usually scope, as we said before, like the scope creep. So the temptation is to build a global program for everyone, but broad programs often become too generic and then end up helping no one. A better move is to focus the program around one motion, segment, region, or deal stage. For example, instead of improved discovery across the whole business, you might start with improving discovery quality for mid-market expansion opportunity. So that's an easier step to start from. Easier to design, it's easier to reinforce, it's easier to measure. If leadership involvement is weak, keep the program smaller. Again, choose an area where you already have maybe some manager support, something that has been brought up and there is a visible pain. And then a smaller program with committed manager will usually outperform a larger program with passive sponsorship. If RevOps support is limited, avoid measurement plan that depend on complex reporting and instead use simple but inspectable evidence. You can do things manually. Review a sample of discovery notes, use a proposal quality rubric, look at code review evidence, etc., etc. So maybe look at as well deal review observation and track manager inspection completion in a more manual way. I would say still having some evidence, even if imperfect, that still creates that performance chain is better than having a beautiful dashboard that no one is looking at and no one can maintain. If your capacity is low, you want to apply the idea of the minimum effective lever mix. You don't need to activate every lever. If the gap is mainly clarity and standard, you may not need formal training at all. You may need strong and weak examples, a manager inspection rubric, and a small change to the deal review cadence. You want to avoid defaulting on the heaviest intervention. More activity doesn't mean at all more impact. I would argue that the best enablement program is the one that creates the most valuable execution change that connects to business outcome at the lowest sustainable cost. So now let's talk about what are the next steps, like immediate steps that you can take. I think the simple next step is to run a 45 minutes program triage session on one live enablement request. So let's say you pick something that is already in the backlog, something that has been requested to you. It could be, again, discovery training. It could be the fact that we need to improve our business cases and the commercial acumen of the team, or maybe the new reps are taking too long to ramp. Now, you don't want to try, obviously, to design the program in that meeting. You just use the session to reframe the request as a performance problem. And you want to answer 5 questions. First, what business metric or GTM priority does this connect to? Second, is the issue systemic or tactical? Third, what output needs to improve in real work? Fourth, what might be blocking the behavior today? Super important because often it's just about removing blockers rather than thinking of adding things. Is it capability? Is it tools or process, information, incentives, capacity, etc.? Fifth, does this deserve a full program or a smaller intervention? So that's the final question. For example, if the request is improved discovery, the working answer might be, okay, the business priority is improving discovery to proposal conversion and as a result affect positively win rate within a specific segment. The issue is systemic across mid-market teams. The critical output is a structured discovery package after the first call. The likely gaps are unclear standards, inconsistent manager enforcement, and some capability gaps, so which requires some development of knowledge and skills. And the decision is to build a program, but scope it to mid-market first. So the next artifact is a draft program charter. That's it. We're not yet solving everything. You need to have just a starting point and stop treating the request as an immediate activity, essentially. You need to treat that first as a performance problem that needs to be understood well. And then you want to identify the minimum enablement lever set to address such a problem and lead to better business outcomes. So the main takeaway that I want to leave you with in this video is that a sales enablement program should not begin with a training idea. It should begin with a validated performance problem. From there, the work is to define the outcome, identify the outputs, map the behaviors, diagnose the real gaps, choose the right levers, reinforce through manager and system, and demonstrate value through evidence. Such a sequence is what turns enablement from just activity delivery into an actual performance discipline. So the full guide and one-pagers that describe the full framework on how to build world-class sales enablement program are linked in the description below if you want to go deeper. They include the full 4-phase framework, the program charter structure, the Kirkpatrick and the Onshape support models, the performance gap diagnostic, the lever matrix, and the 5 stages of sales mastery. So you can use those as a deeper reference point and go back to it whenever you need to. But to start, again, pick one live request, run that 45 minutes triage session and decide whether it really deserves a program. And from there, you can build that first draft charter. So thank you for staying with me all the way through, and I hope you found it useful. I'll see you in the next video.